Anyway, this is also evolving into where the students, I like this part of it, where they can actually convey their thinking in terms of writing. So I'm a big fan of digital ink, if you haven't noticed. So this allows them to convey some thinking in terms of their understanding of the mathematics. So that was an entree to assess and collect that. So it's getting closer to show my work.
That's what I was thinking you could put that in, because they can type math pretty easily in there.
Well, here's what I'm doing on that front. So I'm working with a colleague out of Santa Fe College down in Florida, and what we're doing, we're figuring out, if you notice, when they type this stuff in, look what happens.
Right.
It goes how far? It's about, we found out it's 40 characters. Or something like that. I forget. It stops. We figured it out. And what we're doing now is we're putting in multiple answer boxes so the kids can show their work, their steps. So we're using this, because in the answer box, what we found is that there's a fair degree of ADA compliance inherent. It's not perfect. I'm asking them to improve on it. But if you type in certain key words, like infinity, let me zoom in on this stuff, these are already recognized without the math pad. So you can do pi, of course. Get the cursor out of the way. You can do union. You can do intersect. Right? It's going to try to do sine here, or something. There, it's going to try to do secant, sorry. And then when you do t, it should. There's some sort of c, t, t, there it is. So you can do intersect. You get the idea, right?
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, and so what I do now, they can convey their math line by line, and I can still grade that, or I can actually, we're working towards auto grading is what we'd like to do. That's what we're trying to figure out how to play around. But the fact that the answer box gives some degree of fidelity for showing work is where we're going. And trying to use what's already there. And we're seeing some pretty good results.
I was just thinking the Desmos activities, you should just build it so that it's just an entering answers.
And then when they log in, it's connected. Even though it's a separate cloud, it's still there.
Exactly.
I like where you're going.
Yeah.
Those are some of the tools. So collecting student work as you start to grow your enrollments outside your geographic boundaries of your institution. So that's Desmos. I'm getting a little better here. Hold on, let's try to get this. The FET, that's another one. These are interesting simulation tools, these physics, math simulation tools. This is more like a gaming environment that my students have shown a propensity to appreciate. So they're working on these tools. I'm doing an elementary for math teachers, and so I'm using virtual manipulatives a lot more. And so then they can play around with these things and then drag them over and get credit. There's these kinds of tools. The problem with these tools is they're mostly play. You have to figure out how to validate them below. Eric? Yes, sir?
How about the A word as it comes to these? Do you have any idea whether these would be considered accessible?
Only the Desmos is. Desmos is the only one that I would give some credence to ADA compliance, because they have done things better than most, with the intention in mind, I think. These tools are just trying, in some cases, migrating to HTML5. They're not even looking at ADA compliance because they're out there in that broader market, not seemingly caring.
They're interesting, but the first thought was something tells me this isn't going to.
Yeah, I've been trying to be careful to make sure I mention that, but you're wise to keep pointing that out, because some of these will not meet that ADA compliance as you're trying to strive for complete universal design. So the other items that I'm trying to think of where I lost my screen went off. My overtime, I noticed my time is probably fleeting. Here's what I wanted to go with, is how to get students to show work. So, sorry, I went over.
No one's backing up to go yet.
All right, there you go, Steve. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Yes, good point. Oh, where did I put that Pimatyc one? Where's Flipgrid at? Come on.
Where's your Flipgrid?
You see what?
Flipgrid, is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, thank you. Got it right there.
Yeah.
So what I've been doing lately is I've been asking my students to submit their work in a manner that shows them doing their work. So I've been using a tool now called Flipgrid, and I integrate it inside of WebAssign so that they can get feedback from me. And what they're doing is they get these assignments that they have to show their math. They cannot just simply enter an answer box and get credit. It just doesn't work, especially in a math for teachers, elementary teachers course. So what I'm trying to do right now is just sign in. I thought I had it set up ahead of time. Apologize. Yeah, so I use this one. Sorry, I'm trying to find my way here. I think I closed it out ahead of time. So let's do this. Let's log in. So I'm going to show you some student work, is what it hopefully will give you some interest in this. So this is the teacher dashboard. that I have the ability to access. The students can actually see each other's submissions. So the idea here is that they can benefit from those who put forth their work. And I want to go to a different one. Let me try some of these others that are a little more interesting. So where is she? There, she's pretty good. They're all surprisingly reasonable. So what you're witnessing here is that the tools themselves give you a grading rubric, gives you commentary, and actually allows you to provide video feedback if you so choose. So what's happening is the students are now being able to show their work as I want them to demonstrate it. Most of my work is being auto-graded. Really, I got it to where I almost didn't have to do much of anything. I felt like I had a lot more free time because so much was being automated with the testing, the scoring. And so then I ventured out on this idea of them trying to demonstrate their thinking. So the powerful piece to this is not so much what I see, it's what I hear. When they convey and synchronize their thinking, they are getting more prepared, they're staging their work, they're putting depths of understanding. This is pretty simple stuff here because I was just trying it out. But the idea here, she had some other explanations to what she was trying to do here that added to her deep understanding of the mathematics. So this has been powerful. So what I do now is in WebAssign, I actually have a random number generator, an algorithm, so these kids can't cheat. So I don't just give a code out and they all start to share it. And so the number generator actually goes unique to each student, and that helps me keep and curtail, because I had it right away. As soon as I started, the word was spreading, here's the code, whatever. And I had to shut that down pretty quickly. I was seeing things, kids jumping around out of sequence that didn't make any sense because they had to have had access to something they shouldn't have. So this has been powerful. So when you look at these, I'm impressed by the ability for the students. You can get an idea how much time they're spending. They're really putting in a lot more, and I can validate it. It's creating a portfolio of knowledge that at my school, they actually do have to go into the, I thought I responded to her somewhere. That's her again. Just don't know what I'm doing wrong here. A little nervous. Trying to quickly, trying to do something right. I'm just a little shaky here for some reason. I don't know what I got numbers. Yeah, there we go. So I don't know why. There we go. Yeah. So this one I gave some feedback. I was really impressed what she did. She involved her child in this one. She's trying to demonstrate some virtual manipulatives, which she's using on her iPad. Some students go to classrooms and they're working off the boards. Some of them create their own scenario of all sorts of creative minds out there when it comes to their problem solving. Some are very frustrated and hesitant to do this kind of work. They don't want to put themselves on camera, which I don't require. I do have a need for them to identify themselves, and I've been looking at IDs for the sake of somebody else not submitting the student's work, so that sort of thing. But it's really been helpful in terms of gathering student concept understanding, checks, milestones. The other thing I do here is I limit their time. So I only give them 60 seconds, 45 seconds. So no student has taken the liberty of turning in 2 videos to try to circumvent the time. I would actually kind of give that some credit if they were that ingenious, if they had something compelling to say. But for now, they've all been frustrated by trying to restrict themselves to 45 seconds or 60 seconds, or one was 90. The reason also why I do time constraint is my time. I know how much grading I have to put into it in terms of feedback and giving them. So I was pleased with her works in such a manner that I was able to go in and I gave my video back to her. And so you can see it back from home. I just turned on the video recorder and gave her some commentary there. I was pleased with the way she was creatively approaching that particular assignment. So I have a wrap-up of things that I can do, but I'm conscious of time. I wanted to field some questions. Where do you want me to go as a group at this point? Continue on, or what am I doing?
And then we're doing individual ones, like if you have individual questions, like we can stay back. We're gonna do that for like another hour, but that way, if you need to go, we can go.
So flexibility at the end here. We'll stick around if you have curiosities on an individual basis. As far as wrapping this up, I guess, if it's all right to do that, if I'm on time to do so, there are abilities for you to take all this in your online assessment tool. What I believe is, regardless of your tool, the analytics can really give you insight where you need to intervene. And so what I mean by that, on the screen, I'm using a tool known as WebAssign, and it arranges the assessments in a manner that I can track across homeworks. Homework performance might be quite low initially as you first encounter student activities. And then if you choose to repeat or revisit topics as they go through and maybe address certain questions, you hopefully will start to see a progressive improvement of those content items, those topical items as they keep revisiting them, or maybe just holding the retention throughout the semester. What I've noticed in collecting the analytics and data on my students, when I use questions of a particular type a little bit over and over again, I notice one, students who perform procedurally on questions 7 times correctly, they're showing throughout the semester to retain that knowledge. I haven't gone any further than 1 semester. This is all my anecdotal, like my paired t-test, things that I'm looking at in terms of comparison and so forth. But 7 times is what I use as an argument to my students saying time. If you can give me some time, I believe I can help you retain the information on a level that you can hold on to it for the semester and for time to come thereafter. So that gives them a finite nature versus this feeling that it's hopeless or it's overwhelming, that there's just no end to the effort they're about to embark on. So I use the analytics to intervene with the students. I send them mass emails. If you hadn't noticed, I had in one of my tools, I think we went through quickly, I use a lot of online text messaging to gather my students and get them where they're at. And I got comments earlier. I try to get them to call and talk to me. Those are the other things I do, and couple it with their analytics. They have their own ability to look at their tool scores and self-assess where they need to improve. There's additional practices that's automated in these tools that I use to give them the ability to go work with somebody else like a tutor. And so the data is where I've been also adding my understanding how to use it and put it to tasks to help my students. I think that's really it. Any questions that might be out there to ask of me, generally speaking? Yes, sir, Austin?
So you said, did I get this right, you have 120 students in one class?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And don't tell our admin that that's even possible.
I get to count it in a load a certain way, so I get some reprieve.
Yeah, I mean, my question is, how much of this stuff is because you were kind of had to do it, and how much is because you wanted to do it?
Looking back, when I first started using online assessment, roughly around 2007, I was leaving administration. I was into that stuff. I was doing all that associate dean stuff and things, and I had enough, and I just wanted to relax. And I used the automated piece, and I had a lot of free time initially. I was just kind of, I wasn't grading partial. I was frustrated with partial grading and things. I wanted more comprehensive, so I thought, well, this homework stuff's grading, and the kids are getting feedback. But then I started feeling like they weren't really learning. Something was not quite right, and so I started getting more involved. So to your question, I felt like I wanted to do this more. There wasn't any pressure. And I also saw this online thing as it's interesting then. 12 years later, I just don't want to do it anymore personally. I'm trying to get out of online teaching. If I can have my administration help me get back to the classroom, I would prefer it. Open this Pandora's box of a mess of sorts. And so I felt like initially I went and did it. What's happened is I was pretty good at it relative to my peers.
Yeah.
And then that meant more numbers. So I got a lot of enrollments coming my way from students who had a lot of frustration with math experiences. And what was different is I gave more of my time. That was what separated me from my colleagues. I'd be up late at night.
Oh yeah,
And
he's the only one that answers the phone at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the
Hawaii
afternoon.
time. I show calls sometimes.
In fact, Nadine, I was in your office when we did that, right? And you answered the phone on like the first
So
ring.
I like staying, I don't really need, I don't have a lot of sleep need, but I like helping students in terms of, so that's the problem with what I'm presenting here. I don't want people to have that imbalance of life.
And other than talking to a wall, like, why do you want to get back to regular face-to-face?
I think there's a greater chance of the feedback to be more relevant at that moment. The part I do try to aspire to is give feedback as quickly as possible. I try to automate as much, place it in YouTube videos, place it in hints where they might encounter that frustration point. Because a lot of these early learners seem to be willing to just throw their hands in the air rather quickly, and I'm trying to stem that. I'm trying to keep that at bay so that I can get to them and give them a different perspective of why math could be important. I spend a lot of time knowing what their major is, drawing contextual questions to what they would do in nursing, social work, anything outside of so-called non-STEM, I guess, if we want to describe it that. You know, those students, trying to reach them.
And last quick question. When you said about retainment, you said 7 times they'll retain it. Like, how long are they retaining it?
Through the 14-week semester. So what I'm arguing is that when I look at the mathematical, when I look at the homework low-stakes test, I can match up the students' number of attempts on those problems, and I'll reissue them again on exams and the final. And I can see that retention is holding, and I look at that minimum cutoff to see the A correlation.
But you never go like 5 years down the road, right?
No, I haven't. That's the shortcoming of my current observations. That I don't have that which is more important. I don't have that longitudinal piece that shows, because my fear is it's highly procedural. It's just, it's really rote, and I don't like it. So I'm backwards in my approach. My engineering bias, the way I learned engineering and used it in practice, I used a lot of procedural techniques to solve problems I thought I really understood. And then I started later in the 30s, I started seeing things differently. And then I went into math education, doctoral work and things, and I started seeing things differently after the fact. That led me to argue that I've done things backwards in terms of focusing on procedure first and then conceptual. They're in tandem, and I'm biasing more to conceptual now as a desire to help my teachers and my students learn math long term. But I don't have it beyond the semester at the moment. But I think there's a lot of value you can gain by using online assessments with your co-requisite approach, offload much of the procedural grading in whole. I'm not such a fan of partial grading anymore as a result. And so I want to shore up those holes of knowledge that we're escaping into the next course in the sequence. I want them to have complete or near complete understanding of that requisite material. And I've been trying to acquire that and ultimately try to see what they can say. I got this from Tussey at a Pimatyc Conference. I overheard him trying to get WebAssign to put in audio recording. He wanted to have them show their work. And Tussey was banging away at one of the product people saying, why can't you guys let them record their conversational mathematical understanding? And I was just like, what's he doing? You know, I didn't even know it was Tussey because I've never seen him before. And it turned out it was an author trying to push for that. And then I said, well, you can do that because I was using Google search and some of those tools you can just borrow it off the internet. Siri kinds of stuff, that you can use certain things to collect their thinking.
Yeah, a law teacher showed me flip grade yesterday.
Really?
Yeah, I'd never seen it before.
I forgot where I got it from, but I've been searching for video collection tools. I used my University Pimatyc a prior semester, and it was a shambles. Students had difficulty with their phones. This one's worked out really well with phones for kids who have phones that they can just download an app and record themselves. I like it a lot so far for the feedback I can give. It's been fairly seamless, Thank you, Austin. Any other questions? So I'll leave you with this. If we'll do individual sessions, you're welcome to ask anything you want. I've got a flight out tomorrow, so we got at least 24 hours. All right, at least we got that before us. But once I make my way back mainland, you can certainly ask questions this way. As a colleague to colleague, now that we've all met at least once, if not more than once, you're welcome to reach out by email directly. No intermediary is needed, but I welcome the opportunity because I soak it up like a sponge and try to put it into my own practices. Lafreni, it's not my full last name, but if you want to talk and share ideas, then why not spread that network a little further? What was your first name again? From Patrick. I found out he knows my colleague. He and my colleague taught in Guam. I worked a number of years ago as associate dean to try to get Robert Knight of all things. His name is unique. He doesn't like Bobby. He doesn't like, apparently. But Robert, yeah. So we've got interesting how you meet people halfway or a quarter way around the world. So, thanks everyone. Very kind. Thank you, sir.